right. Hey, folks, a film called Imaginary is opening this weekend in theaters all across America. It's from one of my favorite studios making horror films today, and that is Blumhouse, from the mind of Jason Blum. And hopefully I don't mispronounce his name when he joins us. Jeff Wadlow is going to be joining us today. I don't know if I said it right. Let's get Jeff on the show to talk about Imaginary opening theaters this weekend. Hey, Jeff. Oh my God. Did I pronounce your name correctly? I feel bad.
It's actually pronounced Spielberg. I'm kidding. No, you nailed it. Perfect.
Watch. Oh, good. Good. Hey, congratulations on the film. This is terrifying, and it's based I think this is, look, it's based on the premise that, and I think every kid goes through this. You have an imaginary friend. Every kid has an imaginary friend. You're playing alone in your room or whatever, or you're out there. Every kid has the experience of having an imaginary friend. This takes this concept very far and creates a whole new world. I mean, tell us where Imaginary came from, and how did you toe the line? I mean, it's PG-13, right?
Correct.
But it dances right up to that R-rated line. Yeah. Tell us about it.
Well, the movie is about an imaginary friend named Chauncey, and actually the hero version is right there. See him?
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice. Oh.
That's the one. That's the most expensive teddy bear ever made. So the movie, yeah, it's about, well, look, it's not just about an imaginary friend. It's not called Chauncey, right? It's not just purely a haunted toy movie like Annabelle or Chucky. The movie's called Imaginary because it's actually about imagination and creativity and the power of that. And honestly, just how scary that can be, right? So that's why we were able to make a really intense, really scary movie that is PG-13, because so much of it is about imagination. So this isn't, Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't about someone killing people with a chainsaw. This is about the terror that can result from your own imagination. And that inherently implies that a lot of the tension, a lot of the scares are going to come from things outside the frame. So the same way Spielberg used water in Jaws, we use the power of imagination to imply that things are there that might not necessarily be there.
And when you were, first of all, I think Blumhouse, I will see any Blumhouse movie. I don't care. I just think they're so creative when it comes to the choices of films to make, the types of movies. Blumhouse is just really knocking it out of the park. And while other studios maybe not doing so well, Blumhouse seems to just have their finger on the pulse. Did you work with Jason Blum on this and putting the project together? And I don't want to get into spoiler stuff. I do want to talk about effects and gore later, but tell us what it was like to work with Jason.
So this is my third movie working with Blumhouse. I have a first look deal with them. I have an outstanding relationship with Jason. He is, I think, arguably the most significant producer working in Hollywood right now, because he's actually changing Hollywood. I think in 100 years, film students will study his career the same way I studied the career of David O. Selznick and Irving Thalberg, right? He is a seminal figure in the field of film producer. And for that reason, I feel fortunate to be working with him.
Now, how did you also thread the needle of, I think if I was going to take my kid to a horror movie, they were of a certain age, maybe 11, 12, this movie is perfect. It's because it just dances right up to the line, but doesn't go too far necessarily. But I feel like you could have easily done an R-rated version of this.
Yes and no. I mean, it's not like I did multiple rounds with the MPA to get the PG-13. Really, story drives rating way more than people think. If you're making a movie about a slasher, like, it's going to be hard to get a PG-13, and you're going to have to really cut your shots and get away from things quickly and play that game with the ratings board. When you're making a movie about an imaginary friend, it's really not that hard to get a PG-13, because so much of the danger, so much of the evil, so many of the scares are implied. It's just inherent to the narrative that we're creating.
Well, it's like they say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've heard from horror filmmakers, there are like two types of scares. There's the jump scare, and then there's the wind up where the audience knows something is about to happen, but the characters are completely unaware of those events. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's dramatic irony, technically. You know, Hitchcock talked a lot about that with the bomb under the table idea. That's sort of a cliche. And so I think all jump scares are only as good as their wind up. So you have to build the sequence to get that big payoff, which is the jump scare. Ultimately, I just think it's a mistake to focus on ratings when you're talking about horror, because the MPAA is not rating how scary a movie is. That's not even a part of their conversation. They're rating the intensity of the images as far as adult ideas and themes go. So that's drugs, that's sex, that's blood and guts. And you don't need any of those things to make a scary movie, right? Again, it's just, what's the story? If it's about a serial killer, yeah, there's going to be blood and guts in the movie. It's going to be very difficult to get that PG-13. If you're making a movie about an angry imaginary friend that's going to do terrible things to you, some of them might be real, some of them might not, then it's just not that hard to get the PG-13.
And I have to compliment you. The trailer for this movie really holds back, because there are twists and there are things. I feel like if you've seen the trailer, you haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
Because because the problem with so many movie trailers today, they ruin the third act of the movie. You don't even go past the first half of the film, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Did you have an insight into that with the trailer?
I mean, I love marketing materials. I think it's a part of the process, because for me, I don't just make a movie. I'm making an experience an audience has when they go to a theater and they see a movie. And so part of that is, you know, how the movie is presented to them, and what are the marketing materials? What is the promise that the movie is making to get you to buy a ticket? And for me as a storyteller, that's a huge part of the storytelling. That's basically the tease. That's the storyteller saying, hey, come sit down around this campfire with me. I'm going to tell you a story about this. So I'm very involved in that. And fortunately, our partners at Lionsgate, I think, are some of the best in the business when it comes to designing marketing campaigns. Adam Fogelson, who's the new chairman of the studio, this is the first film he greenlit as chairman of the studio. He comes out of marketing. I mean, he ran Universal Studios, he ran STX, and he didn't come up through production. He came up through marketing. So he really understands how marketing is a part of the storytelling.
We've got over 1,000 people watching us live now on YouTube and Rumble, and we have a lot of questions. I hope you can stick around and answer some of these questions.
Absolutely.
Let's go to them right now. Solomon Thornton asks, greetings, Sir Jeff. I saw the trailer and I can't wait. Do you have any advice for beginning filmmakers?
Well, you know, I actually teach a short film workshop in my hometown of Charlottesville, Virginia. I've been doing it for 20 years now, which is hard to believe, called the Adrenaline Film Project. And I work with 12 groups of filmmakers to help them basically make a short film in a version of the studio system with Hollywood mentors, where they have to pitch and then get a green light. Then they have to write in a day and get a green light. And they got to shoot in a day. I visit the sets, I give notes, I help them direct some scenes, and then we edit together for a day. I have to green light their cut, and then we screen the movie on a Saturday night, 72 hours later, and have a big party. And one of the things I talk about in that workshop, and it applies to any beginning filmmaker, is I say, look, just get it done. If it's good, it's gravy. I think so often perfectionism turns into procrastination. There's some cliche, I'm sure I'm butchering it, but people just want it to be perfect. And then because they want it to be perfect so badly, they don't actually just finish. It's just get it done. Just finish something, show it to the world, and then you're a filmmaker and you're on your way.
From Aaron Taylor says, question for Mr. Wadlow. What was it like to work with John Bon Jovi in your first major feature film, Cry Wolf?
It was amazing. I mean, the guy is a prince. You know, we have the same birthday, believe it or not, March 2nd. And still 20 years later, you know, I'll email him on our birthday and I say, happy birthday, JBJ. And he writes back immediately and wishes me a happy birthday as well. He's a lovely guy. He's a talented actor. I mean, everything he touches turns to gold. I was really lucky to have him in my first film.
Christopher Moonlight Production says, my daughter and I love going to horror movies together. And I noticed that Blumhouse really has their finger on the pulse with young people. What is the thought process behind making horror for them?
Honestly, they really have their finger on the pulse of not just young people, but young female moviegoers. You know, they're really the demographic that drives these scary movies. That's the reason why Truth or Dare was a hit for me. That's the reason why Megan was a big hit for Jason. And so, you know, when they're doing their research about marketing materials and when they're thinking about what kind of stories they want to tell, they're thinking about that audience. It's not an accident that the three leads in my movie are not men.
Right, right. But I mean, horror has such a rich history of female leads. Everything back to Psycho, or the first Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis. It just
Phantom
does.
of the Opera.
Phantom of the. I mean, just like it just does. Sorry, we'll get to that question, but like, so I almost feel like while certain genres like romantic comedies more appeal to women, horror is pretty. It's pretty 50-50, male and female.
I gotta be honest with you, I would have thought that too, but the research doesn't bear out. I mean, women really drive horror movie ticket sales way more than you think.
Well, do you ever go to Monster Palooza or Son of Monster Palooza in Los Angeles?
I'm familiar with them, but I haven't been fortunate enough yet to go.
It's that horror convention. It's pretty 50-50 in terms of a con, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I think a con crowd is a little different than the people who buy tickets, the casual moviegoer. I think it's just couples often drive movie sales, and when couples are going to the theater, we all know that our girlfriend, our wife is gonna have an opinion about what they want to see, and they drive those scary movie ticket sales way more than you think.
Yeah. Here we go. Another question from Aaron Taylor says, what was your experience with Kick-Ass 2? What is your opinion on Jim Carrey's apparent change of heart over the film during marketing? Okay, I don't know about this.
Yeah. So, ultimately he decided not to support the film when it came out because he was having a real, you can read his remarks online. He was having some different feelings about violence and the depiction of violence in media after the Sandy Hook shooting, which happened quite a bit before our movie came out. But I think it just, for him, it was a real moment in time. And look, everyone's entitled to their opinion. I mean, I share his views about gun violence, but our movie was a satire. It wasn't really, in my opinion, contributing in any kind of meaningful way to that conversation. But he felt it was an opportunity for him to get his views out there, and I applaud it. Working with him was amazing. I mean, the guy's a genius. One of the things we love about Jim Carrey is that we never know what he's going to do or say on screen. And I'm here to tell you, in real life, you never know what he's going to do.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Yeah.
Let's see. Thanks. Fear the Turtle 21 says, thanks for being here, Jeff. Just curious what movies made you realize you wanted to make horror films. Also, this movie looks awesome. I'll definitely be checking it out.
Thank you, Fear the Turtle. That is very kind of you. I appreciate the question. The kind of horror movies that made me want to direct horror films. I mean, Poltergeist was a major influence for me with this film. I saw it when I was 6 in theaters. It really messed me up. I don't know if it made me want to make horror movies so much as it altered my personality forever. The horror movies that really inspired me to work in this genre were the classics. I mean, I remember seeing Seven in theaters and really being inspired by that film. Jaws obviously is one of the greatest films of all time. It's usually in my top 3 favorite films of all time. I also really like, subgenres of horror. Horror fantasy, I think, is a very underserviced subgenre right now. Like, I love everything from Labyrinth to Hellraiser, and you don't see a lot of movies in that space. And I think Imaginary, when people see it, they'll realize that it really is more of a horror fantasy with big psychological horror elements, but it's really a horror fantasy at the end of the day.
Red French Moon, who's a member, says, my question, does a director need to have a certain atmosphere on set for doing horror movies, or you're leaving that to the actors to get in the mood?
It's an interesting question. DeWanda and I had a bunch of laughs on this movie because we really kind of came to the conclusion that while we were making a very scary movie, the actual process of making a scary movie is kind of hilarious. Guys in pursuits, eating craft service. I mean, it's just all kind of surreal and funny if you just take a step back. But that's sort of my flip answer. My serious film school answer is, yeah, absolutely. It's up to the director to create a feeling on set. And, if I'm directing a funny scene, I try to be kind of loud and funny. But if it's a serious scene where the actor needs to be having a real emotional moment and responding in fear to something, I make sure that set is quiet. I make sure the crew respects what's going on. And I do everything I can to support that actor in that performance beat.
Hey,
I have a
it's
question,
me.
but
Sorry. Sorry, Alan.
just a question. But what did you guys think when you heard that I Am was going to come out in a few months after this?
You mean IF?
IF, that's right.
Yeah.
IF,
Yes. Well, we were editing the movie in New York in the same building on the same floor that they were editing their movie. So I actually passed John Krasinski in the hallway a few times. And I mean, obviously, I know who he is. He has no idea who I am. So I kind of like kept my head down. I don't know. There's a long history in Hollywood, actually, of movies about the same thing coming out at the same time, like White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen, or Volcano and Dante's Peak. I mean, it's actually kind of an interesting thing that happens sometimes in the film industry. Fortunately, our films are so different in tone. I mean, they've made this wonderful, based on the marketing materials, it looks like they've made this wonderful live action Pixar feeling family film that looks very funny and emotional. I'm a huge Ryan Reynolds fan, whereas our movie is a low budget Blumhouse supernatural horror movie. So they couldn't be more different in tone. So I think there's plenty of space in the marketplace for both.
There are heartfelt family moments in your movie as well. Plenty
There are a few. I mean,
a lot.
We have characters that hopefully people will care about, but I think it would be the definition of false advertising to call our movie a family film.
Yeah, you're not taking the kids to this.
Let's see, Mr. Wadlow. I think The Strain is an underrated show. Were you more involved than just the writing?
I mean, honestly, not much more involved. So what happened with that show is, I believe it was their 4th season, was their final season. And I love writing. Sometimes I write and I don't direct. Sometimes I direct things I haven't written. I wear a lot of different hats, and I love TV and film. And Carlton Cuse, who's the showrunner on Lost, is a mentor of mine. I helped with the first season of Bates Motel. It was really just Carlton, me, and Carrey Aaron who figured out the first 3 episodes. And then I just finished a comedy for Netflix, and Carlton reached out to my reps and asked if I would come in and work on the final season of The Strain as a writer producer. And I said, I don't really staff Carlton. It's not really my thing. I did Bates because it was interesting to me to start a show with you and launch a show. And that was an incredible learning experience for me. And he said, he has this very deep voice. It's very specific. You know it when you hear it. He said, well, Jeff, I taught you how to launch a show. Wouldn't you like to know how to end a show? I was like, okay, that's exciting. So I was on staff, and it was an incredible group of writers, and I had a lot of fun. And when you're the writer, director, and producer of a movie like I am for Imaginary, it's all on your shoulders, right? You got to make it happen every day. And if there's a false moment in that movie, or if you go over budget on that film, it's 100% on you. When you're in a room full of writers and you've been hired to just kind of come in and help out with the final season, I find it kind of liberating, because I could just pitch crazy ideas, and if Carlton liked them, they were in the show. If Carlton said no, they weren't in the show, and I just didn't lose a minute of sleep. So it was wonderful.
From Rumble, Caveat Ties says, how do you go about acquiring a team of crew members such as set builders and such? And I'll say this, the set in parts of the movie is kind of a character in the film. So it's very important.
Yeah, it's critical. I mean, every movie is basically a little startup business. So you have to hire all these people, and it's all about your partners and setting up a pyramid. So the director and the line producer sit at the top of that pyramid. Yeah, you have executives and other producers who aren't on set, but when you're really talking about the production itself, boots on the ground people, it's a creative producer, a director, and a line producer. And line producer means that's the person who kind of holds the line between the talent, which is above the line, and everything else, which is below the line. That's the crew, the catering, the sound stages, the props. All those line items in the budget are called below the line items. And you just start prepping, and you start hiring people. And a movie is very almost military in its organization. So you start hiring other people, like one level down on the pyramid, and then they hire the people below them who bring in the teams below them. And it's all about relationships, honestly, and good word of mouth from other productions.
Just a few more questions here. Some really insightful stuff, because a lot of people in our audience are aspiring filmmakers. LA Scribe says, Jeff, do you cut the gratuitous blood, nudity, and sex to achieve a PG-13 and follow up, like me, Do you leave in like 12 frames of R-rated material in the edit bay to subliminally get it by the censors, so to speak?
On this movie, I didn't really cut anything out. Like everything I shot is in the movie. We didn't have to jump through any hoops to get the PG-13 rating. On movies that have stories which lend themselves to R ratings, where I've gotten the PG-13 rating, like Truth or Dare or Cry Wolf, or even my action movie Never Back Down. It's a negotiation. You go back and forth. They don't have any written rules. There's no guidelines. You kind of learn from experience. You have a lot of conversations about it with the MPA, but it's really just a group of parents that are watching the movie and kind of telling you what they think. It's not like there's some censor or some bureaucrat that's making the decision. It's a voluntary organization that parents participate in, and they give you the rating. It can be a lot of back and forth, and it can be a negotiation, but ultimately they're just trying to provide a service that ultimately promotes movie going. So I don't really rail against them. They're not trying to stop me from making my movie. They're trying to get information out there so that when an audience shows up for your movie, they understand what they're going to watch, and they're not disappointed or angry or feel like they've been misled.
And last question here from Susanu Ala Richard says, curious about your thoughts of the use of humor in horror films to affect the audience's mood.
Yeah, all my movies have humor in them. I can't make a movie without levity. It's I work in a lot of different genres. I don't just work in the horror space. I also have made action movies and comedies, and I'm really trying to emulate the career of a filmmaker like Richard Donner, who made Superman and Lethal Weapon, and he also made The Omen. I mean, he worked in all these different genres, Goonies, and I want to do the same thing, because for me, genre is like not dissimilar to, I imagine, how a chef views cuisine. So if you're a chef, you don't want to only make French food your entire career. You probably would love to work at an Italian restaurant or try a different kind of ethnic cuisine. And what you do is you identify the pillars that people expect in that genre, and then you try to offer your spin. And my spin always includes humor. Like, I can't do something that's just like a dirge. It's just not my style. I like those movies. I don't have a problem with them personally, but I just find humor in everyday life, no matter how grim the circumstances might be. I think the trick is you just never sell out the stakes. You don't want to make a parody. You're not making a skit. It needs to feel real for the characters, but there's no reason why the characters can't find humor in certain moments.
Well, Jeff, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Congratulations on Imaginary. Opens this weekend in theaters tomorrow, actually, Thursday.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me. I love talking to fellow film nerds about film. It's a great thing that you guys do, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. All right, take care. Thanks again.
Guys.
See you soon. Later.